Sonic Speed Reviews. Hey guys, OCDsaster here. Before I get into the video, I just wanted to make some corrections and some clarifications at the front versus going back in and like changing everything that I said. This wasn't a scripted video, I kind of just went off the cuff. So I'm just going to amend some things here at the beginning. So if you hear some incorrect stuff in the video, just kind of remember I'm fixing it right here, right now. I mentioned that cyberspace only had like 4 different themes, being like city, cyberspace, Green Hill, and then also Angel Island. But there's also chemical plant as well. So there's a mix of themes for the cyberspace levels. It's not just 4. I even say 3 in part of the video. So I just, as I went back and started replaying the game to get some footage, I was like, wait a minute, like I was wrong. So that's one thing. Another thing, I never mentioned the Psy Loop. It's an interesting mechanic. It's fine. It's nothing to write home about, but that's here in the game. And then lastly, when it comes to the combat controls, what's really irritating is sometimes you're trying to do a certain homing attack or movement such as that, but then you go into a combo instead. So those were the things I really wanted to cover quickly. I'm sure I got a lot of other things wrong, but those were the things that I have just been focused on, hyper-focused on. So please just ignore me later in this video when I'm talking about 3 or 4 cyberspace themes. They did more. It's still more to be desired, but yeah. Today, November 8th, marks the 3-year anniversary of Sonic Frontiers, a game that I've grown to love and greatly appreciate for all that it's done for the Sonic franchise. This game basically proved to casual people and to Sega themselves that Sonic was not a dying franchise or property, and since then we've been in an era of Sonic that's been great, with tons of great games, movies, and other things down the pipeline that's making it very exciting to be a Sonic fan. And on a more personal note, Sonic Frontiers was the first game to really help bring this channel to light and really start moving things forward and getting the success that it has. Obviously, a lot of that success is to you guys, those who are just joining the channel, or those of you who have been subscribed from the very start. But in a sense, Sonic Frontiers was kind of that content hub that kind of moved things forward for this channel. And what is this channel? This is OCDsaster Blue, my Sonic exclusive channel, where everything we do here is Sonic related. So if that sounds like something your speed, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and check out some other videos after this one. This is a Sonic speed review in which I review a Sonic game at a quite quick pace. It's not super elaborate, I kind of just hit specific beats, and I decided it would be very appropriate to go back and review Sonic Frontiers. The categories we are going to cover are art design, gameplay, controls, level design, and the soundtrack. So without further ado, let's jump into my quick supersonic review of Sonic Frontiers on its 3-year anniversary. We're going to start off with the art design. Art design is the category that encompasses not only the graphics of the game, how it looks, the theming of the game, but also stuff such as the UI and menuing for the game. And I have to say, this game is beautiful. Not only do they incorporate the next-gen console for Sonic Frontiers, including the lighting that's very dynamic, and also having day and night cycles on these open world levels, but everything looks phenomenal. From the blades of grass, to the sand, to the mountain structures, everything looks very earthy, natural, and almost hyper-realistic, which is a first to really see in a Sonic game and is a nice look for this newer installment and this new system that they were trying to do, which we'll get into in a little bit. Not to mention, I really do like the renders for Sonic and all his friends. It's a little bit more darker to fit the tone of the story. They're a little bit less saturated. Although the cyberspace levels only have 3 different types of theming, which is being like a Green Hill theme, a cyberspace theme, or a city theme, they do look nice, and the moving background is very cool and trippy and kind of helps with the vibe. From that standpoint, I'm not going to dock any credit or any points. However, we do have a few things in this game that could have been a little bit more desired in the art design category. One of them would be the fact that the menus are kind of bare. I think they were going for that. They were trying to have a simplistic look to it. But to me, it's a little bit too simplistic and a little bit too plain, and it kind of stands out against the rest of the game. I don't know if that makes much sense, but I'm not a huge fan of the menuing, and even just navigating the menu is a little bit tricky and just a little bit clunky. So that is going to be docked a few points. It's nothing egregious, it's not like broken, but it just kind of is jarring compared to the rest of the game. Going back to cyberspace, the fact that we only get 3 different types of theming for these cyberspace levels, I'm going to have to dock a few points because it's not very creative, it's not very inventive. They kind of could just recycle this as they're building out the levels. I'd much rather have the levels be fun and playable versus just looking good and looking different, so I will say that, but I did wish for a little bit more, oomph, a little bit more artistic flair for these cyberspace levels. And then lastly, we have to talk about it, the pop-in on the islands, Kronos Island, Chaos Island, Ares Island. It's a little bit jarring. It was their first go about for this game. It's a massive map, and so when you have rails and springs and stuff just popping in, it's a little bit jarring. It's not very natural, and it kind of shows a little bit of the date of this game versus playing stuff like Shadow Generations, which we now have to look at for how to improve upon some of this stuff. So not that big of grievances, but it's still there to a degree. I also want to mention the enemy designs, because how could you not? The enemies look great. They're very different from what we've seen before in previous Sonic titles. And then you have the Titans, and yeah, they are absolute peak. You cannot tell me that the Titan designs are not inspired. They are great. So overall, if I had to rate on a number scale of 1 being the lowest score, 5 being the highest for art design for Sonic Frontiers, I would proudly give it a 4 out of 5. Once again, it's just the lack of theming for the cyberspace levels, the pop-in of some of the items on the island, and then also some of that clunky, not really vibing with the menuing kind of stuff. But overall, that's a pretty good score to get us started. Next, we're going to move on to the controls. This will most likely be the lowest rating out of the category because I do controls based off of how I feel playing the Sonic game, how frustrated I am with moving around, or how good it feels. And I have to say, even before playing future Sonic games after this one, the controls are kind of a mess. I love that you can go into the menu and adjust certain things such as acceleration, top speed, and the sensitivity, but that's only for when you're in the island parts of the game. The open zone areas is what they like to call it. That is the only time that really matters, because once you hop in to subspace, it's a little bit more clunky for a lot of reasons, and they kind of limit what you can do based off of your controls. Sonic, depending on what you do, because also you have to play around with the settings a little bit, but it always seems, regardless of where you're putting the settings, Sonic kind of just loses all control when you're jumping. Like, you kind of just don't get that kind of air control that you would like. It's more of a feel thing than me just telling you, but if you played Sonic Frontiers, you know what I mean. When you boost, you sometimes go too fast. You sometimes break the sound barrier, and then it's like, okay, well, now I missed that thing, and I fell off the ledge, or what have you. But if you're doing the cyberspace levels that are side-scrolling, everything goes to a complete halt. You are not fast at all, even if you're boosting. It is an absolute nightmare to play these stages, and I'm a person that doesn't really like side-scrolling Sonic levels that much, so adding this on top of it really, really upset me, and it just didn't feel right. As far as the combat system goes, that's probably the cleanest out of the controls. However, it is only a few buttons that you need to press, and then it's mostly a cutscene to do, well, not a cutscene, but an animation to do certain hits and certain combos. But it's not that egregious. But yeah, the controls are a little bit all over the place, a little bit slippery here and there. The air controls are definitely not that great. You're not jumping as much as Sonic, and if you are, you're kind of losing all control. And then, like I said, in cyberspace, those side-scrolling levels are just an absolute nightmare to get through. You do not feel fast at all. Blue blur, more like the blue slug. So I will unfortunately have to give controls for Sonic Frontiers a 3 out of 5. much improvement is needed. And I keep mentioning Shadow Generations, but I'm going to mention it again because that was like the next title, the new Sonic that came out, that showed that they listened to the fans and they improved on the controls, because it definitely doesn't feel like that for that game. But for Sonic Frontiers, it is a 3 out of 5, sadly. Moving on, we've talked about art design, we've talked about controls. Now it's time to talk about the soundtrack. It hits on all cylinders, guys. It fires off. The ambiance of the islands, the open zones are great. The soundtracks, the upbeat like EDM music in the cyberspace, and then come on, you guys know it. You guys, they did not have to go that hard with the actual music from Keelan Quinn from Sleeping with Sirens. I believe that's his name. I think I got it right. Him doing the vocal tracks for the boss fights against the Titans, the rock, the orchestra. Everything is just so good in Sonic Frontiers. It really makes you feel like you're in old school prime Sonic era, early 2000s, the rock and roll, the Crush 40. I think this music's better than Crush 40, I want to be quite honest with you. I'm a huge rock and roll guy, and this just oozes aura and really makes you feel like an absolute badass as you're fighting these Titans. And it's just also the underlying beautiful pianos and violins and string instruments. And like I said, when you're in the open zone world, you have the different kind of tones and vibes throughout while you're running and exploring. It's a little bit more peaceful. Getting into cyberspace, they kind of bump up the bass. It's great. It all blends very well together. It is probably one of my favorite Sonic game soundtracks of all time. So with that being said, Sonic Frontiers, the soundtrack is a 5 out of 5. It is a perfect score. I really don't have any notes on that. There might be 1 or 2 songs that are really annoying when you jump into cyberspace, but besides that, it's a great time. This soundtrack deserves all the love and praise that it can get. So we've talked about the art design, we've talked about the controls, we've talked about the soundtrack. What is next? Next is the level design. So the level design is broken up into 2 parts, the open zone levels and then also the cyberspace levels, which I've already alluded to previously. Open zone is the new hottest thing for Sonic AAA titles. They really want to move forward with this and see what they can do and innovate, and I'm excited for that because it's essentially a hub world. If you've ever played like Sonic Adventure, it's like that, except there's more to do, there's more interactivity. You can run around, collect things, fight enemies, get power-ups, upgrade your skill tree, and then you can go into these cyberspace portals and then do more of a boost formula like Sonic level. So the open zone is a great concept and a great idea. It's more of an open world sort of hub world situation. Like I said, there's a little bit of some issues with like pop-in and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's a very well-wanted thing. We all kind of agree collectively that the design of the open world is very good, and we all want to see it in future Sonic games. However, there are a few little things here and there that I wasn't a great fan of when it comes to the open zones. One would be that everything looked kind of the same from island to island. Of course, you had the Ares Island, which was sand versus grass, and Chaos Island, which is volcanic. Those were like the standouts, but everything else was just like grass and types of grass. And I was really hoping for more diverse types of islands to each one you go to, so you're in a different island. So you would have like maybe a snowy or ice island, one that's a little bit more open plains, a little bit more creative. So that's my thoughts just on that. And then Chaos Island, I don't like that island. I like the theming of it, but when it comes to actually playing it, they force camera perspective so many times it's nauseating. It's a chore because you'll be running in third person, jump on a spring, and then the next thing you know you're in second person, and then you're switching back. And not only that, you're like fighting the camera depending on what part of the open zone you're in. And then that map specifically, from my remembrance, you can't really just loop around the map like the other ones. You kind of have to linearly travel through and then backtrack in order to get the spots because of the way it's laid out. And it seemed a little bit rushed in my opinion. I do think the game unfortunately did kind of get pushed. They did delay it, which is great, so that way they could work a little bit more on it. They've learned their lesson from other games, but they still should have been given a little bit more time to flush out these later islands, because they definitely got rushed towards the end of the game. That's not on them. I can't really, fault the developers for that all entirely. A lot of that is like a publishing thing, and when you delay a game, you get fan backlash, and if you delay it again, people are going to get upset. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, so the open zones, for the most part, are pretty dang good. So now we're in cyberspace levels. We've already talked about the theming a little bit, about the art design, soundtrack. Now we're going to talk about the level design of these cyberspace levels. The goal of these cyberspace levels was to make the players feel nostalgic for previous Sonic titles and Sonic levels. They aren't one for one, but they wanted you to kind of, as you're playing, be like, oh, wait a minute, this seems very familiar, because cyberspace is technically Sonic's memories, even though some of them are shadow levels, but we'll get to that later. And I could say that, yeah, it's really good. I really enjoyed playing these stages for the most part, not the side-scrolling ones as much, but you do get that aha moment in your brain. You do get those like muscle memories for certain segments, like, wait a minute, this was Metal Harbor from Sonic Adventure 2, right? And I think that's a very cool thing that they did. These stages are from short to long to medium. There's a very diverse amount of length for each. You're not sure which one you're getting until you play it, which I really like. As I'm talking about the level design and rethinking things over, I realized I mentioned that there were 3 themings for the cyberspace. There might be 4. I can't tell if I'm taking the city and blending it in with the cyberspace, but there's also the Angel Island looking levels as well. So I do want to correct myself, even though that should be way back in the art design portion of the video. I'm too lazy to go cut this out and put it back there. So this is where that is going to live. So apologies for getting that part wrong. Some stages are really fun and easy to get through, some are fun but challenging, and others are just challenging for no reason and can really make you want to throw your controller while you're fighting the controls of Sonic. That's kind of more of the issue here, rather than the level design. It's the controlling of Sonic for some of these level designs. All in all, combining together the open zone and the cyberspace levels, I will give the level design for Sonic Frontiers a 4 out of 5. I think they had a very strong, core foundation for these, and they do give you a lot to play from. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Last but not least, we have the biggest category to rate for Sonic Frontiers. If this review was weighted, this would be the highest weighted category, and I saved it for last. It is the gameplay. The overall gameplay for this game. Is it fun? Is there replayability? What are the bosses like? What is the story like? It all falls under this category, and I do have to say, they really tried their best for this game. The story is darker than most Sonic games. It's nothing crazy, but they do try to make it deeper and have theming. Each of Sonic's friends, Knuckles, Amy, Tails, have their own arc, have their own little internal quests that they're doing. They're talking to Sonic about how they want to improve and move forward in their character development, which I think is really nice. There's the Secrets of the Ancients, which is a little bit similar to previous Sonic titles. They try to connect those in a little bit more with the, Chaos and with Chow, and you have the Coco. I know there's extra deeper lore if you read a bunch of Eggman's journal entries, and I'm sure that there were comics or prequel materials that weren't in the game, but I'm focusing mostly on the game. That's probably the weakest part, is the Ancients and the lore of the Ancients, but that's not really what this game is about. This game's more about the grounding of Sonic and his friends and moving forward with the franchise and what they want to do. For example, Tails doesn't want to just be in Sonic's shadow anymore. He wants to be able to prove to himself that he can go on his own adventures and do his own things and be his own hero. Amy also is kind of in the same thing, where she's trying to figure out who she is and wants to do good in other places away from the Sonic team. So those are really nice moments in the game that I really come to appreciate. The cutscenes are great, the music's beautiful as they're having these conversations. And then the main story is, they're trapped in cyberspace because of something Eggman did trying to research the Ancients. Sage is a new character that everyone seems to really, really like. I think she's fine. She's like his AI daughter, basically. and they really build on that relationship throughout the game as she's trying to protect Eggman, as that's her programming. She's a little bit complex. She's gaining her own sentience. She's starting to understand the difference between right and wrong, good versus evil, as these titans, these guardians of the ancient islands, are awakening and are serving you as boss battles. And when you're fighting them, you get 7 Chaos Emeralds. You go supersonic to fight them, and that, well, let's back up for a second. We'll get to that part. That's essentially the story. It's nothing super crazy. It's not one of the best Sonic game stories ever, but it's nowhere near the worst of the Sonic stories. I think it's right there in the middle. Moving on from that, though, you are in the open zone for the majority of the game, and it's kind of a collect-a-thon. You have to collect a bunch of these little tokens to then go over to talk to and rescue your friends in the cyberspace, and you do that multiple times within each open zone. So it's a lot of running around, fighting enemies, collecting stuff, grinding on rails, finding shortcuts, doing these awkward off-path things to get these collectibles. So that's one form of collectible. Then you have the Coco, which are kind of just like bonus things to collect. Then you have these like shards from enemies that you defeat that'll help you evolve your skill tree. You get hearts and another type of emblem that you can go to like some elder in a very like Legend of Zelda style to increase your damage, ring capacity, speed, and your health. So all that is thrown into this as a mechanic as you're doing the combat system. You go to cyberspace and beat challenges of getting S rank, coming in at a certain time, collecting 100 rings or whatever rings are required. It's not always 100. Collecting red rings, and then that'll give you a bunch of keys, which will then allow you to unlock Chaos Emeralds, which you then have to collect 7 of the Chaos Emeralds before you go and fight a Titan. But a lot of the Chaos Emeralds are also in mini games that you have to do with your buddies. So there's a lot of things working here, but it does feel like a massive collect-a-thon, and that kind of does bog down this open zone. It's not very diverse or multifaceted. It's really just collect this to get this, to collect this to get that. And on a first playthrough, it's not that bad at all. But then as you play the game over, it does kind of get a little bit tedious and boring, and you kind of feel that slog of a second replay coming on, which we'll get into in a little bit. So that's kind of the core game loop that you go through, and then there are enemies that are scattered throughout the open zone where you can use your combat system to fight them. You can do simple combos, you can dodge, you can unlock special abilities by upgrading your skill tree. It's a very plain skill tree, to be honest. You unlock everything relatively quickly, and then what you get is all kind of just, you know, okay, flashy more than anything. I really wish that if they were to keep doing the skill tree and stuff, they would give you way more things to do, way more customization. It's very plain, very simple, but I think they were just kind of testing things out, and they, once again, were kind of rushed for this game. But yeah, combat is okay. If I had to rate the combat separately, it'd be like a 3 out of 5. It's nothing terrible, nothing great. And then you have the collect-a-thon stuff to go up against the Titans, which is probably the highlight of this game, because for the first time ever, you don't just go supersonic for the final boss, you go supersonic for every boss, and each boss is unique with their own power sets, with their own abilities, and you have to really learn the fight. And it's great because you have the metal, the soundtrack, you have, you know, the lead singer of Sleeping with Sirens singing in the background for each fight. You have Supersonic doing a whole bunch of cool flashy stuff, and it's just a sight to behold. It's really hype. It really kind of sets things up for what are they going to do to top this in future Sonic installments. It's really phenomenal. If I had to just rate the boss fights alone, it'd be like a 4 out of 5, just because some of them are a little bit repetitive and some of them are a little bit clunky. But all in all, very, very fun boss fights. That's kind of like what you're striving to do, striving to get through. And that's why the boss rush, I think, is probably more fun, even though it is very challenging to get that S rank for doing that. But speaking of boss rush, you have arcade mode where you can replay all the cyberspace levels. You can do battle mode where you do a bunch of different fights and different gauntlets. You can do boss rushes, you can do challenges in which you go to each island and you have to go through a certain amount of waves of enemies and then fight the boss at a certain amount of time. So there are options you can do outside of the story to really replay and do more for your experience. And on the plus side as well, all the DLC for this game was absolutely free. Cosmetic DLC, these, challenge mode DLCs. So that's also something to really consider when just reviewing the game and thinking about how they thought about the fans when making Sonic Frontiers. That was a lot, and I honestly really skimmed over a lot of the gameplay for this game. There is a lot in there, a lot of intuitive things. There's puzzles that really slow down the experience. There's certain challenges in certain areas to get to that are a little bit confusing unless you know what you're doing. I didn't even mention that you can do like tricks off of high places. There's very busted moves in which you can just hold down the block and just stay in the air. There's these certain little nuanced pain points in the game. That's because they were trying something new for the first time, trying this in this engine, and I mean it's basically ground zero for a whole new era of Sonic, and since then they've been improving on Sonic games, and hopefully they keep improving in future installments. This review has gotten far too long. This was supposed to be a quick review. We're now in like the 20-minute mark, so I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna give the gameplay out of 5 a 3 out of 5, a solid 3 out of 5. You gotta remember, 1 out of 5, 3 is like average, 4 is above average, and then 5 is perfect. So 3 is not a bad score to have. So, reviewing everything, the art design, the gameplay, the controls, the level design, the soundtrack, I give Sonic Frontiers a ranking of a B. Guys, it was so close to an A ranking, but it's just those little things that really kind of dock at some points, such as Sonic's controls, for example. He just feels a little bit too slippery, and then when you're in the air, almost uncontrollable, and then some of those level choices were a little bit jarring. There's just these tiny little things that, they just have to, iron out in future Sonic games, and they eventually do in Shadow Generations. This review is a little bit unfair because I now know what the potential is, and so that kind of affects the review a little bit, but a B is still absolutely great. If you don't agree with my review, that's fine. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. What makes Sonic games so great is that it generates a vast and wide community of different people, personalities, and opinions, and it's great to be able to share differing opinions without tearing each other down. So make sure when you're in the comments talking to one another that you keep it civil. Remember, you can disagree with someone and still treat them like a human being, like a person, and just because you don't have the same opinions doesn't mean anything of the other person, doesn't mean they're lesser than you or you're better than them. Everyone just likes things differently, and you might be one of the people that really like Sonic Frontiers and believe that it deserved an S or A rank, or you could have thought that I was way too nice on the game and I wasn't critical enough and that it should be a C or D rank. These are all opinions that I'm willing to read down in the comments and hear your guys' thoughts, as long as you're not being absolute dickheads about it. With that being said, I'm OCDsaster, and I hope you have a super Sonic rest of your day. See ya!